So we are in chapter 15 of 1 Kings today, which is not obviously Genesis 1. So I guess before we hop in, we probably need to cover some context. How about maybe we just have one person recap Genesis through until the monarchy, and then I can do the rest of the monarchy through.
I can do the context of Genesis through monarchy. Okay, so we start off with this great big God, creator of the heavens and the earth, right? And this great big God, for some reason, wants a relationship with man. And so the way that the whole story begins is with him placing man in a garden where God and man essentially dwell together. But man is very quick to mess that up, and God is very quick to keep pursuing them for some reason. And so basically the storyline of the Bible is that man keeps running from God, and God, for some reason, keeps chasing. They're kicked out of the garden because of their sin, and they're doomed to die, and there is a curse placed upon the ground on which they work, and a curse placed upon the serpent which led them astray. And the Bible is anticipating this future day when one day sin will be atoned for, and there will be redemption for humanity, and one day the ground itself will have to be recreated, right? There will be restoration for the world. Eventually God picks one man through whom he is going to create a nation which will be like a city set on a hill, a light shining in the darkness, people who are going to be protectors of the way of Yahweh. Yahweh is the name of this one true God. And this man's name is Abraham, and eventually his seed becomes the people known as Israel. And God does a bunch of special stuff through the people of Israel. He delivers them from slavery, he gives them a law, and eventually he gives them a land which they come to dwell in. And whenever they ask for a king, he gives them a king, right? Originally he gives them a king like the nations because that's what they wanted. But since he called them to be a holy nation, eventually he does give them a holy king named David. And he makes this... you wanted me to go all the way to 1 Kings, right?
It don't matter.
Okay.
I was going to say just up until the monarchy, but you can go as far as you want to.
I'll get us to 1 Kings. That way you can just read. Okay. So eventually God gives them David, who is this holy, amazing king. And David messes up and stuff, but by and large, he is a faithful king unto whom God makes an eternal promise, an eternal covenant that God is going to be with him forever, and that God will give him an eternal dynasty, and that his seed will rule over not only Israel, but eventually the entire world forever and ever and ever. And so the way that 2 Samuel ends is with David basically at the end of his reign, which then leads us into 1 Kings, which is where we are now at.
Okay. Let's see if I can do this. All right, so 1 Kings starts off with the end of David's life, right? And so Solomon becomes anointed king after one of David's other sons tries to proclaim himself king when David is old and dying. And as David, passes away, he, talks to Solomon and prepares him, really for David to be gone. And Solomon starts off his reign actually pretty strong. He takes care of business. He establishes the kingdom that, David, lived his entire life to establish, and he ushers in a period of peace. He builds a temple for God, and his glory comes to dwell in the temple, and that's like the climax of the story thus far. Like Solomon is seeming to fulfill all these different covenants. He seems like he might even be the Messiah, but unfortunately, shortly after the building of the temple, we see that Solomon kind of loses. He kind of loses focus. He doesn't really have a clear goal to work towards, and so God warns him to be careful because sin's crouching at the door, and if he's not careful, he might be led astray and lead the nation astray. And unfortunately, at the end of Solomon's reign, we see that he does not finish strong. Under Solomon, the kingdom prospers physically, but eventually he turns to other gods. He marries a crazy number of foreign wives. He multiplies money. He multiplies military, which are all things that the Torah specifically said not to do. And so as a result, God decides that he's going to discipline Israel, but he doesn't destroy the house of David. He spares the line of David, And so he ends up ripping, not the entire kingdom like he did with Saul, but he rips away 10 tribes and gives them to one of Solomon's servants, Jeroboam. And his son Rehoboam will end up with the other two tribes. And so in the last few chapters we saw this happening. The kingdom got divided, and we've been following the lines of both the kingdoms, and so far it hasn't been going too well on either side. Last chapter we talked about the king of Israel and how he had essentially created this entire false religion to keep people from going back to Judah. And God sent a prophet to rebuke him, but he didn't listen. He was given a lot of chances to repent, but he never did. And eventually God tells Jeroboam that his line's going to die off. And sure enough, Jeroboam dies. And at the end of last chapter, we also saw Rehoboam die. Yes. And so we're going into this chapter with new kings on both kingdoms. And so that pretty much brings us here. So we'll be talking about kings on both sides. It's going to go back and forth in between Judah and Israel, so it might get confusing because they don't all reign for the same time periods, but we'll work through it.
Yeah. This is one thing where that commentary that I've been reading and referencing almost every week, once you get to chapter 15 and 16, they actually cover 15 and 16 all together, just because it all kind of just like runs together here. And this is really where it says we get to the sections of 1 Kings that history students loathe. It's not that history students loathe it. History students love it. But it's what makes students loathe history, right? Because this is where it gets very repetitive and almost redundant. And everything starts like seeping together, right? To where you've got like Solomon's reign over 40 years covering 11 chapters. And then you've got like another 20 years covered over basically up until this chapter, right? So 60 years over 14 chapters. And then these next two chapters cover another 60 years. To where all of a sudden it's just fast forwarding through history. And it's almost like that's the author's point. The author's point is that sin is boring. And it just leads to redundant. There's nothing holy or set apart about these people that merits their stories being told. It's just sinners sinned. And then they died. And then move on. I just thought that was just that mentality might hopefully spice up how we view this, to where if it feels repetitive, it's almost intentional. I'd say that's interesting.
Yeah, and obviously we'll get there. But I think I had the same wording in last chapter, but how it says and all the other things they did, this is not written in this book. You can tell that at the very least the author's intent in what they're writing, it's not concerned with being comprehensive. There's a different purpose to what they're writing.
Yeah. They're if you want to know more, just go read the other stuff. But I don't feel like talking about that. For sure.
All right, we hop in?
Let's do it.
Do you think it'd be easier to read through the whole thing just because of the back and forth, or do you think we should just do one slide?
Maybe we could read through the whole king. If that would make sense.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe not the whole thing, but maybe just read the whole section regarding each king or something. I don't know. It's really up to you, but... Okay.
Because I know there was one part that... Okay, we'll just do that.
Well, hey, it's up to you, dude. Let's read the whole thing.
All right. Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam became king over Judah. He reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. And he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had committed before him, and his heart was not wholly devoted to Yahweh his God, like the heart of his father David. But for David's sake, Yahweh his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, to raise up his son after him, and to establish Jerusalem, because David did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, and had not turned aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. Now there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. Now the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. And Abijam slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David. And Asa his son became king in his place. Now in the 20th year of Jeroboam the king of Israel, Asa began to reign as king of Judah. And he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abijam. And Asa did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, like David his father. He also put away the male cult prostitutes from the land and removed all the idols which his fathers had made. He also removed Maacah his mother from being queen mother, because she had made a horrid image for Asherah. And Asa cut down her horrid image and burned it at the brook Kidron. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly devoted to Yahweh all his days. And he brought into the house of Yahweh the holy things of his father, and his own holy things, silver and gold and utensils. Now there was war between Asa and Baasha king of Israel all their days. And Baasha king of Israel went up against Judah and built up Ramah in order to prevent anyone from going out or coming in to Asa king of Judah. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold which were left in the treasuries of the house of Yahweh and the treasuries of the king's house, and delivered them into the hand of his servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad the son of Tabrimon, the son of Hazael, king of Aram, who lived in Damascus, saying, Let there be a covenant between you and me, as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you a gift of silver and gold. Go, break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me. So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa, and sent the commanders of his military force against the cities of Israel, and struck down Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth Maacah, and all Kinneroth, besides all the land of Naphtali. Now it happened that when Baasha heard of it, he ceased building up Ramah and remained in Tirzah. Then King Asa caused an announcement to be heard throughout all Judah. None was exempt, and they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building, and King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa and his might, and all that he did, and the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? But in the time of his old age, he was diseased in his feet. And Asa slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. And Jehoshaphat, his son, reigned in his place. We'll stop there.
Okay.
Any thoughts?
So this is probably something we might talk about later on.
Mm-hmm.
And I've looked this up earlier, and I was actually Googling it a second ago. There seems to be an implication about Asa and Abijam that scares me a bit, because it says that their mothers have the same name.
Oh,
and yeah. I know I've heard some people argue that Maacah, that it should be grandmother, but I've also heard other people suggest that there's something incestuous going on there.
Oh, yeah.
And to me, that's just the thing that immediately sticks out, mainly because the author draws attention to it both times, right? So both with, this is something we'll probably talk about, I imagine, but when it talks about Abijam, it says that, I don't know if the microphone can pick this up. We're currently receiving a message on the answering machine. Okay, but it says, like, Abijam, he reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. Right? And then, whenever you get to Asa, it says, so in the 20th year of Jeroboam, king of Israel, Asa began to reign. He reigned 41 years, and his mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abishalom. And some people argue that that's talking about a grandmother or something like that. But the way that the attention is drawn to it seems like the author's trying to argue otherwise, in which case, that's just really messed up, because that means that Abijam and his son have the same mother, which would then therefore seem to imply that Abijam had a child with his mother, which is wicked.
Crazy evil.
Like literally the definition of wicked. And Abijam goes down as being a wicked king, and so that would fit. But I don't know. That's what stuck out to me. That was your question. There's my answer.
Yeah, I do remember seeing something about that. And I think that's what it was. I think I saw something where it mentioned grandmother. I went back and I don't remember seeing grandmother in the translation. Mm-hmm. So I was like...
No, it's more like an inference that people make. like the text says mother, but people try to justify it by being like, well, no, it probably means grandmother, because I don't know if there's a separate Hebrew word for like grandmother. Like it's like you just call them mother, like just like it says that David was his father, right? When it really means like grandfather,
descendant. Yeah.
But something about the text, it emphasizes mother, right? Like it's commonplace.
Using the same word twice. It's using the same word twice, and there's no reason to think it's being used differently.
Yes, yeah, like that's the thing, and like I don't know. We'll probably talk about it when we get there. That's just the thing that sticks out to me, where I'm like, I've heard people's arguments, but it doesn't sound as convincing to me, and it sounds like there might be something weird going on there. But
yeah,
that's probably not the main emphasis of the passage. That's just the thing that
stuck out.
It stuck out. It stuck out.
Well, I mean that makes sense because
yeah, the
state of the nation is not great to begin with.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we can go ahead and go verse by verse now.
Yeah.
Now in the 18th year of King Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, Abijam became king over Judah. So who was Jeroboam again?
He's king over Judah.
Well, Jeroboam's king over Israel.
Oh, Israel.
Yes, Jeroboam is the one that Ahijah prophesied would take the 10 tribes from Rehoboam.
Yeah, remember at this point, like it gets confusing because the kings don't all reign for the same time period, so it's not always the same two kings. So I mean, if one king reigns 20 years, one reigns 10, they're gonna reference like what time that king reigned by the year of the other person's reign. Yeah. Right. So it's saying in the 18th year of Israel's king, because Rehoboam already passed away. Right. He died before Jeroboam died. It said at the end of the last chapter how long I think both of them reigned.
Jeroboam reigned 22 years. Rehoboam reigned, was it 17, I think? Let's see.
Yes.
Yeah, Rehoboam reigned 17 years.
Or yeah, 17, because they would have reigned the same year, right?
Yes, yeah.
So 18th,
yeah. Also, just from a historical perspective, like for us, it gets really confusing whenever it starts saying the 18th year of so-and-so. From a historical perspective, this is some of the most useful information in the Bible, because almost all of our biblical chronology, like this is where we can have pretty much confidence in like the chronology of the Bible, because there's so many chronological references in like 1st and 2nd Kings, and since there's other historical records outside the Bible, like we can use all that information to figure out like what dates are being talked about here, and that allows us to work back to figure out like when things in Genesis and stuff are happening. I just wanted to highlight that because that's like, for us, this is really boring, but from a historian's perspective, this is like gold, right? It's perfect, right? It's like, yes, finally, to where everything we know about like biblical chronology comes from these passages, which is super cool. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So this is the 18th year of King Jeroboam, so Jeroboam still has 4 more years reigning, and that's when Abijam takes over.
Yeah.
And it looks like his reign is going to end before Jeroboam is done.
Yeah. So we got Israel, we still have the first king, Jeroboam, and then in Judah we've had Rehoboam, and now we have Abijam. So it's like, that's 2 different kingdoms.
Yeah.
So he reigned 3 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abishalom. So he reigned 3 years, so like you said, he'll die before Jeroboam dies, but... anything else there?
A lot of people think that Abishalom is in a lengthened version of the name Absalom.
Oh, I think I saw something about that too.
And so, and that would make sense because it wouldn't, like, if you're just thinking from a historical perspective, like, it's not very common for them to reference who a person's mother is. The only reason you would really do that is if the person was significant. And so, if Abishalom is the lengthened version of Absalom, well, then basically what it's saying is that Rehoboam had a child with basically, I guess that would be like, what, his cousin? Right? Because if Rehoboam's father was Solomon, and Solomon's brother was Absalom, and if Absalom had, like Maacah, right? So Rehoboam and Maacah had a child, and that would be
Abijam,
which would also help explain why Abijam would take over the throne, right? Because he's got like 2 of David's sons like flowing through his veins.
Yeah, because he'd have to be in the line of David.
Yeah, and so like that would probably explain why it mentions the mother and draws emphasis to her, because otherwise that's just not, I mean, not to take a dig at women, that's just not typically what historians would do. They would only mention that if it was significant, and they don't give any other signifier, so it would probably be referencing Absalom, right? And so...
Yeah, because those are not people that have other... Like, if it's actually Abijah, then as far as I know, neither of those people have been mentioned, like, beforehand.
Yeah.
But if it's Absalom, then it's calling directly back to the Davidic bloodline.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his mother's name was Ma'akah, the daughter of Abijah, and he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had committed before him. And his heart was not wholly devoted to Yahweh his God, like the heart of his father David. I know we talked about this before, but every king will be compared to David from here on. But anything there?
One thing that sticks out to me is that it treats it like two separate things. Firstly, he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had committed before him, and his heart was because to me, one would imply the other.
Yeah.
But this kind of lets you know what the author of 1 Kings is thinking of, right? To where whenever it's saying wholly devoted to Yahweh his God, it's specifically talking about like abstaining from idolatry, right? Whereas sins are referring to all the other sins, right?
Yeah,
and so
true.
like he walked in all the sins of his father, which he had committed before him. It's saying this dude was a terrible person, right? Like it's saying that he did morally corrupt things. And in addition to those morally corrupt things, he wasn't devoted to God, right? So it's, and you're going to see this through 1 Kings where like the person can do morally corrupt things, but the author of 1 Kings will at least give them some credit as long as they're devoted to God, right? So they'll be like, yeah, they walked in sin, but at least they were devoted to God. But this guy, he failed on both accounts.
Or just like David, like he did, like it mentions like the Uriah the Hittite, like he did have sins, obviously, but he was still fully devoted to Yahweh.
Yeah, well, like the emphasis is on faith. You can understand why the New Testament authors were like, yeah, faith is the key, because that's what's being emphasized here, right? There's works over here, and then there's faith, and the works are testifying to the lack of faith, but there's still like a dividing line there, right? There's the faith in Yahweh, and if you're not being faithful, you're probably walking in sin.
And it probably describes like the people that he's over too, because if you're just someone who is committing a lot of sin, well, that's not good, but that probably shows you a little less of how the other people are going to be than if you're not wholly devoted to God, because like that's what your kingdom is going to be based on. So if he's not wholly devoted to God, then like you know that the people that he's over are also not going to be wholly devoted to God. Because he's like the example. Like you could be someone who's sinning a lot, but maybe the people may or may not follow after you. It's probably not. It's not good. But if he's not wholly devoted to God, then you know that the people are just in shambles also.
Yeah. Plus, we quite literally know what the sins of his fathers were. Like,
Yeah.
So you already kind of get the idea of what specifically the author might have in mind. Like it talks specifically about Solomon building high places and building altars, and that's what Rehoboam did too. And so, I mean, also quite literally that stuff is kind of being referenced by nature.
Yeah. And you also have like the external and internal corruption, right? So it's like of the actual person. He walked in all the sins of his father, right?
That's
External.
like the feet.
Yeah. So it's like the walking, right? Like you're doing sinful things, but his heart was not wholly devoted to Yahweh, right? So it's like, the heart, like where the heart is, there your treasure will be also, right? Or where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
But I think that's cool. Like this dude's just messed up from beginning to end. That's what it's saying.
Yeah.
And this is the one where, sorry, I'm just thinking, like in Chronicles, it says a little bit more positive stuff about him, right?
With Abijah?
Yeah, isn't that the one where like there's like, doesn't he give like this super awesome speech like before a battle? I could be getting it mixed up. I'll go look at that right now. So
I don't think I read the Chronicle part about Abijam. I read just the part about Asa.
Yeah, in Chronicles it doesn't call him Abijam, it calls him
Abijah.
But the author of 1 Kings calls him Abijam because there was already another Abijah in the previous chapter, and I think he's just trying to not confuse us.
I saw a commentary say something. I don't know if that's probably a stretch, but they suggested that the Jum refers to like a Canaanite sea god.
Maybe.
And they thought that like maybe he like went from Abijah to like Abijah. That's probably reading too much into it though.
Well, Abijah, like that does end
my
with
father
like,
is Yahweh versus
yeah,
my
that ends
father
with
is.
yeah, maybe.
So it's the idea of him like he was faithful at the beginning, but then he fell off.
Yeah, my father is Jam.
So maybe you're right then, because I think that may have been the point. Like even if it was wrong, I think that's the point the commentator was making. Was that he was faithful, he was strong at first, and he fell off.
Yeah, because 2 Chronicles 13, it's where like Abijah stands on Mount Zemarim, and he's at war against Jeroboam, and he gives like this amazing speech saying, "Do you not know that Yahweh God of Israel gave the rule over Israel forever to David and his sons?" And like he goes on this long impassioned spiel, and I was like, wow, you don't read about that in 1 Kings, but that's because 1 Kings, once again, it's just kind of getting to the point. But
and we'll talk more about it later. But also, like it's all like starting off strong isn't always. It's not as important as how you finish, you know.
yeah,
And so even if he did have high moments, like the way that the author of Kings seems to present him is that in the end he still ultimately he died walking in the sins of his fathers, and he was not fully devoted.
yeah. Well, yeah, the emphasis is on the word holy, right? It's his heart was not wholly devoted to Yahweh. It's not saying he didn't worship him. It's just that he worshipped other gods in addition to that, right? Like his devotion was split. He was trying to serve more than one master.
He turned to the right
Can't
hand.
sit at the table with
Yeah.
demons
Yeah.
and
Right.
God's table.
Yeah, exactly.
That is interesting. Just examining the different stories and seeing like what they focus on.
Mm-hmm.
Because Chronicles would be probably more focused on like just chronicling the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, in many ways, the Book of Chronicles, it seems to be a little bit kinder to the line of Judah because it's almost like Jewish like propaganda for the people of Judah, which is fine, right? But it's more likely to highlight the good stuff, right? Like whenever it comes to David and Bathsheba, it doesn't even mention the David and Bathsheba thing. It says David stayed home from war, and then it just moves on, and it skips what happened when he stayed home from war. And so I think in Chronicles, it's just it's almost like Kings like gives us the nitty gritty view from land, whereas Chronicles gives us the view from God. Where like God just like he's very gracious and forgiving, whereas here it's like it's almost like you can feel the prophet's anger at the kings as they're messing up.
That's true. Anything else? Alright. So, and he walked in all the sins of his father which he had committed before him, and his heart was not fully devoted to Yahweh his God, like the heart of his father David. But, for David's sake, Yahweh his God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem to raise up his son after him and to establish Jerusalem. Because David did what was right in the sight of Yahweh and had not turned aside from anything that he commanded him all the days of his life, except in the case of Uriah the Hittite. So what's it saying there?
Are we talking about Asa?
4 and 5.
I'm interested in why, because this goes back to the whole listing things that David did wrong that God forgave him, right? So we can go to the whole Bathsheba thing. But I'm curious as to like, if obviously David went to heaven, and if God counted that against him, the whole thing with Uriah the Hittite, he wouldn't have. But I'm curious like why it just specifically points that one out. It doesn't just list all the things David did wrong. It just says that specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do find it very interesting that it mentions it here because it doesn't usually draw attention to it.
Yeah.
Like we've mentioned how God like favors David in the past, and it just says David did what was right in God's eyes, and then later on it will say the same thing. But for some reason in this instance it says, except that Uriah incident, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, because it definitely was like the number one, like, I guess, blemish on David's record. But like you said, It is interesting. Like, you think it would either mention it every time or just like not every time.
Yeah, it could very well just be the author acknowledging the fact that he's not ignorant of what David did, right? Because he's mentioned several times that David was faithful to God, and it's almost like the author stepping in and being like, "Don't worry, I know what David did. but that doesn't change how God relates to David.
Point
right?
still stands.
Yeah, because like right here, it's like, hey, we know that like Abijam's being pretty bad, but look at how faithful God is to David, even though David messed up. Right? Like David really messed up with that Uriah thing, right? But God is still faithful, right? So it could just be highlighting the author's knowledge, right? So he's not ignorant, but then it's also highlighting God's graciousness, maybe.
And if you're familiar with that story, then it's also maybe highlighting just how unfaithful he was.
Yeah. I don't know why it does that. Right now, I'm trying to look up something, like, we keep seeing that phrase, lamp in Jerusalem, and it showed up several times. I'm just, like, Googling to see what people think about it. What do y'all think about that phrase? Like, God gave him a lamp in Jerusalem.
Is it talking about his God guiding him? Because whenever I think of a lamp, I think of one of the Psalms talking about he lights, that his word is a lamp to our feet and a light to our paths. So,
I think the author's trying to make it clear that God like still guided him, but it was not because of his own actions or his own doing.
Just thinking about it, I guess one of the possibilities to me is the idea of like a light kind of representing like hope.
Yeah.
Like that despite how bad these kings are, that there's like, the author's maybe acknowledging like, don't worry, like God is going to preserve like David's line.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I think that's definitely what lamp is referring. It's referring to like the line of David. Sorry, I kind of cut you off.
No, you're good. That's pretty much all I was just saying, is that like for David's sake, God is like preserving his line, and it's kind of like like the lamp being like almost like a symbol of like hope as well.
Yeah. You all know that song, like the Elton John song, "Candle in the Wind"? Right? It's talking about Marilyn Monroe, and then he re-sang it, like he sang another version for like Princess Diana whenever she died. But like the song is saying like, it seems to me you lived your life like a candle in the wind, right? And the idea is that life is represented by like a flame. And to like Marilyn Monroe and Princess Diana, Elton John is saying your candle blew out too quickly. And it seems like that's kind of the imagery going on here, right? For David's sake, Yahweh gave him a lamp in Jerusalem, right? If this had been anybody else, God would have allowed that fire to be blown out, right? But for David, he might allow the fire to not burn as bright as it once did, but he's going to keep the lamp burning, right? So it's like the family line of David, and the royal succession is represented by the fire. And it's like, it might not be burning as bright as it once was with God, like whenever David was in charge, but at least it hasn't gone out, right? It seems to me that's probably kind of what it's going for there. I just think that's interesting that it keeps referring back to that. Like even at the end of 2 Samuel, it used the same language.
I mean, that makes sense. And if you could say that for David's sake, it might be calling back to the covenant. It's just calling back to the fact that, which is basically what you just said. But like with like Jeroboam's covenant, God promised like essentially an eternal dynasty, but it was conditional, right?
Yeah.
It was saying like, if you're not faithful, that you're going to be cut off. And so it could also just be like, it could also just be like a reminder, like because the verse preceding it is saying that that Abijam is not faithful like David was.
Yeah. Well, no, like it's saying Abijam deserved to be destroyed, but for David's sake, it literally explains lamp in Jerusalem to raise up his son after him to establish him. Like to me, the interesting thing is just the imagery. Right? I just like that, like the lamp. Like I just like that imagery, like because David even talked about that. Like at the end, like remember, like one of the reasons why they didn't let him fight is they didn't want the lamp to go out.
Yeah, they call him the lamp of. You're the lamp of.
Yeah, I like that. And then later on, Jesus says, "I'm the light of the world." I was like, it's cool.
Yeah, like what was it John says about like the light shining in the darkness, and the darkness had not overcome it.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's going to keep going back and forth like this with all these kings until we get to Elijah, I believe, chapter 17.
Yeah. So 15 and 16 is going to get pretty repetitive. Then we'll finally get to Elijah.
Okay.
But
we'll move on. Now there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all the days of his life. And that's just acknowledging like that there was fighting between the two kingdoms.
I just think it's interesting that it says Rehoboam there. Because Rehoboam was the previous king.
That's true.
You know, you would expect it to say Abijam and Jeroboam. I don't know why it does that, other than the fact that maybe Abijam's reign is so short that it doesn't really, it's not really saying much to say that Abijam and Jeroboam have this extended conflict, because that was only 3 years.
That's true.
But wasn't that phrase at the end of chapter 14 as well? Something like that? Yeah, chapter 14, verse 30. There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. I don't know. I just think that's interesting that it's repeated. It's almost like just the author, once again, just highlighting monotony. Back whenever you're in like 1st and 2nd Samuel, like whenever the people go to war, there's like all these exciting stories, right? You've got Goliath being slain. You've got, Saul going and visiting the witch of Endor, and like all these different crazy things. But then now it's just like a passing comment. Endless war. Endless war. Endless war. Just ongoing, constant strife, enmity. Highlighting the division in the land, I don't know.
Yeah. Was that the very last verse?
It wasn't the last verse, it was like it was the second to last verse.
Okay.
It says, there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually, and Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and his mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess, and Abijah the son of king became king in his place.
Okay, so it's literally like 6 verses before this.
Well, yeah,
Because
yeah.
really it'd be like just up there.
Yeah. Yeah, if you were just reading it right through, it's repeated pretty back to back.
Yeah. Anything else about that?
I think it's just sad that Rehoboam, the house of Rehoboam and Jeroboam were constantly fighting when God He didn't mean for Israel to have a king in the first place, but I just think it's sad that they're fighting. They should be united.
Well, right, because even with Solomon, he enslaved foreign people. And we talked about the moral ambiguity of that, whether or not it was sinful or not. But even he didn't dare enslave fellow Israelites, and this isn't enslaving them per se, though maybe they did. But it's even a step further. It's we went from, at least Solomon wouldn't do this to his own countrymen, but now we literally have the kingdom divided and they're fighting each other like a civil war.
And one of the big reasons David picked Jerusalem was because he was trying to unify the nation, right? But it's just now they're just all fighting one another again.
Yeah, it's literally a civil war.
Yeah.
We'll move on. Now, the rest of the acts of Abijam and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And there was war between Abijam and Jeroboam. And Abijam slept with his fathers, and they buried him in the city of David. And Asa his son became king in his place. So I guess there we do have Abijam mentioned in the war. Anything else there?
The rest of the acts of Elijah only did.
So I guess we don't have that book.
Well, the Chronicles of Kings of Judah,
I know.
presumably, is the book of Chronicles.
Oh, that's right. We don't have the one of the Kings of Israel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't know for sure, because I think usually people say that the book of Chronicles, I think they attribute it to Ezra, which would presumably be written, that'd be written later. But it could be that Ezra, edited and, finalized. We're just assuming that they're the same books, but it could be something different.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think that's weird, how much it keeps emphasizing the war.
Yeah.
Right? So it's chapter 14, verse 30, chapter 15, verse 6, chapter 15, that's only 2 verses back to back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is the same verse, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. That's just very strange. And I guess it never says how old Abijam was whenever he became king, right? It just says that he...
Yeah, I don't know if Chronicles mentions that or not, but...
Yeah, I don't know. Because we know Rehoboam was 41 years old and when he became king, and he reigned 17 years. So he would have been 58 when he died. And so I was just trying to do the math. So Abijam, I mean, his dad was, so he'd be pretty old whenever he reigned. I was just making sure that he would how old he probably was when he had Asa, but there's plenty of time in there. So we're good.
Anything else before I go to the next slide? Now in the 20th year of Jeroboam, the king of Israel, Asa began to reign as king of Judah. And he reigned 41 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Maacah, the daughter of Abijam. So what's it saying here?
Homeboy had a baby with his mama.
Let's hope not.
I'm looking more into see what people say, but it seems like people are kind of just. It seems like most people agree that it was incest, but
I think I'd like to think of that as abomination.
100%.
100% abomination.
No doubt.
No doubt. Yeah, so some English translations will translate it as grandmother, but in Hebrew it just says mother.
Same word.
Yeah, and if it was saying grandmother, I don't see why it would repeat it again, because, I mean, if Asa is the son of Abijam and Abijam's mother was Maacah, well then obviously it would be implied that, Asa's grandmother was Maacah, right? And so the only reason it would seem to repeat it to me is if the author is trying to emphasize things are getting messy here, right? Yeah. It's like Abijam's mother was Maacah, and Abijam's son's mother was Maacah, and you're like, oh, wait a second, because that would imply that Abijam had a baby with his mother, and therefore Maacah would be both Asa's mother and grandmother, which is terrifying.
Yes.
Especially because we're dealing with the kings of Judah, and it's like, oh man, this is the chosen line. Like, this is not good. Yeah, it's just wild.
Terrifying.
Anything else there? Reign longer. I guess that's. I don't know if it's better or not, but.
Yeah, 41 years. Yeah, so in the 20th year, so Jeroboam still has 2 more years on the throne. Asa began to reign, king of Judah. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around it all, right? So Jeroboam still has 2 more years.
This would be good for
I thought about doing that, but then I realized that'd just be a lot of work. But I thought about putting a little timeline on the side there. Maybe I'll eventually do that. Yeah, his mother's name was Maacah, daughter of Abijam. Also, it might be worth looking into from a textual criticism perspective. I wonder if there's any evidence of copyist error here, where it could be, since the structure is the same. I wonder if there's any evidence of copyist error where earlier versions maybe only had they didn't say the phrase there, about Maacah, to where it could be almost like a scribe was copying it, and they accidentally copied it back to back for 2 kings. That could explain things, but I don't know. That might just be me trying to wiggle my way out of incest.
Yeah. Understandably, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't want to believe that.
Yeah. But also at the same time, it's not beyond David's family to have incestuous tendencies, because even David's son, his firstborn son, Amnon, remember he violated his sister, almost half sister, Tamar, right? And that's what literally kicked off the whole thing between David and Absalom and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we know it's possible. We just wish it wasn't. But regardless of whether or not Asa was the result of that, Asa seemed to kind of turn out a little bit all right. So that's good.
Yeah, we get a lot more about Asa in Chronicles.
Yeah.
Was it almost 2 chapters, or was it 2 chapter and a half?
I don't know. Let me go look. I listened to some of it earlier, but
I think there's at least a full chapter pretty much devoted to just him.
Yeah. Let's see. So 2 Chronicles 13 is about Abijah. And 2 Chronicles 14 and 15 and the first half of 16. Oh, actually, no, all of 16. So 14, 15, and 16 are all about Asa.
Okay, so 3 chapters.
Yeah, 3 chapters. Wow. I actually didn't realize it was that long. Cool.
Yeah, I hadn't realized I read through that much.
Yeah.
And that's more than pretty much everyone except for like Solomon and David and them I can think of.
Yeah, there's going to be some later on, like Hezekiah's going to get a lot of chapters and
Mm-hmm.
Josiah and stuff like that. But yeah, it's almost like whenever the king actually does better, the authors give them more time because they're like, hey, let's draw attention to these guys.
That's true, I was going to say.
Yeah.
I guess for good reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, so... and Asa did what was right in the sight of Yahweh, like David his father. He also put away the male cult prostitutes from the land and removed all the idols which his fathers had made. We'll just stop there. So what's with this whole male cult prostitute thing? We read about this last chapter.
Weren't there like male prostitutes and basically brothels in the high places, and they emphasized that there was like homosexual activity going on in the brothels in the high places as well.
Well, yeah, because most likely it'd be primarily guys going to the temple.
Yeah. So good for Asa. That's good. Get rid of them. He seems to recognize that there's some bad stuff going on, and yeah. Get rid of those male cult prostitutes.
Amen.
And remove the idols. I think this is something that's interesting. I guess this is really the first like reform that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
Which is like it's something that like eventually like whenever you read First Kings over and over, eventually I guess you kind of get like used to it. But to me, I think it highlights something very interesting about the culture there. It's like the people are aware of the fact they're supposed to be only focusing on Yahweh, right? To where it's not like whenever Asa gets on the throne, he makes it an intentional effort to get rid of the idols, right? I just think that's very interesting to me because it's like it's not just like it's not about like it's something that can't be tolerated, right? That's the whole point. Like the other kings are being criticized for either building high places or tolerating them, and what we're going to see is that it's like a back and forth. Like imagine how crazy that would be. Like every time a new king's on the throne, you're wondering whether or not your temple or your shrine is going to be torn down, right? Or whether or not they're going to build one, right? Like I just think that's like this is an interesting social dynamic, right? To where, is this king going to get rid of our gods or keep them? Like that's something like we're just not even familiar with that over here in America. We have like freedom of religion, but like to live in a monarchy in a culture that is so influenced where like religion is the backbone of it.
Yeah.
To where it's like the king's in charge, all right, and then all of a sudden like you wake up in the morning and like slaves have been sent to tear down these idols. And so, like there's just a very interesting dynamic, and that it's probably not making him very many friends by doing this, because it's not like the idols were being forced there, right? People had them there because they were choosing to worship.
Yeah.
And so by them being torn down, it would seem to imply that this probably would not be a popular move. I don't know. This is something I don't think about a whole lot, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah, no, it's definitely good to at least try to think about that perspective. But definitely good. He also removed Ma'akah, his mother, from being queen mother because she had made a horrid image for Asherah. And Asa cut down her horrid image and burned it at the brook Kidron. So what's it saying there? What was the issue with what his mother did?
Didn't she have relations with someone that caused, I think, the birth of Abijam?
Well, in the verse is talking about the Asherah.
Oh, the Asherah.
It's like an idol, a foreign god she's worshiping, which is not good because, I mean, if you think about that's his mother, like, that's a really, like, close relationship. Like, you're in the same, like, household, and she's, you know, worshiping a foreign god, and he's trying to follow after Yahweh, and so it would make sense why he would get rid of that, because it's close to him.
Yeah, because, I mean, for sure, people, like, everyone needs to be held to a standard, but especially people in, like, those high positions of leadership, they need to be held to really an even higher standard.
Yeah. Speaking of not making friends, I mean, deposing your own mother.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that takes guts. Right? Especially if, like, if this is, like, if his mother is the same one who was the mother of Abijam, like his grandmother or whatever. I mean, that means that she's been in power for a while. And, like, it says that she was the daughter of Abishalom. That's, like, Absalom. I've heard some people suggest that maybe she was, like, the granddaughter of Absalom, too. I don't know. But no matter what, like, this is a person who is used to power. And he's, like, deposing her. Right? Like, it shows the degree to which this dude is, like, committing his reforms. Right? Like, he's like, Mom, this is not simply a matter... Like, I'm not just enforcing this amongst the people. Like, you gotta get out of here, too. Because what you did is unacceptable. Like, that's... This dude's... He's thorough. So,
That's true.
it's kind of cool.
Need to not downplay that.
And I'm wondering, like, when it says horrid image, I wonder what it fully means. But, like, like, what was it about this particular idol that she made that was so horrid? Right? Like what exactly did she make for Asherah that was like... I mean, we can just speculate, but...
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a vivid description.
Anything else there?
I guess the main thing I'd highlight is also the Brook Kidron. The Kidron Valley is the one, just if you can, like, picture it on a map, like, you got Jerusalem, and then you got the Mount of Olives to the east. The Kidron Valley is the one that runs in between. And it says burned at the Brook Kidron. I wonder if that's I know that there was, like, a refuse place there where they would burn stuff down. I'm wondering if that's Gehenna, right? Gehenna is, like, the phrase that like the Jewish people use to refer to, like, hell.
Because it's like an ever-burning place.
Yeah, it's like the ever-burning place. I'm wondering if that... I know it's in that area. I'm thinking it's attached to the brook, like to the Kidron Valley. I forget the exact location in Jerusalem, but it could be referring to that's where he burned it, which would be kind of ironic because it's like he sent Asherah to hell.
That's true. I hadn't really thought about that, but
Yeah. I'll look into that. We can keep going, but...
Okay, so he had also removed Maacah, his mother, from being queen mother because she had made a horrid image for Asherah. And Asa cut down her horrid image and burned it at the brook Kidron. But the high places were not removed. Nevertheless, the heart of Asa was wholly devoted to Yahweh all his days. And he brought into the house of Yahweh the holy things of his father and his own holy things, silver and gold and utensils. So what's going on there with verse 14 and 15?
High praise.
I'd seen something with verse 14 because I think in Chronicles it mentions that he took down the foreign high places, but it also says a few verses later that he did not take down the high places. And I don't know if this is really true, but at least some commentators seem to think that maybe he took down the high places that were devoted to, like, other gods.
Okay.
But that maybe he didn't take down the high places that were devoted to Yahweh. Would that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that can make sense. So it's like God, like, because even high places devoted to Yahweh are things that God wouldn't want, mainly because he's chosen Jerusalem. Like the whole point is people are supposed to come to Jerusalem, right? And that the whole point of a high place is that that's where you're worshiping God. And so it could be that he took down the ones devoted to other gods, but he left the ones devoted to Yahweh, which is like, he kind of missed the point a little bit.
I say, because I don't know if that would be necessarily, like, it seems like it's not emphasized here, maybe because I don't know if that would be something that was intentional or if that was something that it was a kind of like the last couple chapters, like people just maybe not taking the law seriously, like maybe he didn't understand that it wasn't okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think, but
yeah, I don't know.
If that was a compromise or if it was something where because he doesn't really seem like he's compromising much here.
Yeah.
So,
well, one thing that we're going to see eventually is that at some point throughout this story, and we don't know exactly when, the book of the law gets lost, like the Torah. Because eventually there's going to be one king who shows up and like people are like going and looking through like the storehouses in the temple and they're like, hey, we found this like dusty scroll. What is this? And then the guy like reads it. He's like, what? He's like, no wonder things are going so badly.
Is that Josiah?
Yeah. And so eventually the Torah is going to be lost. And so it could be that as time is passing, people are becoming generally less aware of what the Torah says. It might still be a little early for that right now, but that could very well be possible. Another thing that's interesting is that just like in general, it seems like First Kings is actually being more positive in regards to Asa than Chronicles is. Just a little bit, because in Chronicles at the end it talks about like Asa kind of rebelling against God a little bit, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah, well, because one story that's not included in here that is in Chronicles is that God sends a prophet to rebuke Asa, and he imprisons him.
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking.
He hardens his whole heart against.
Yeah, Hanani.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because normally it's Chronicles that goes easier on the kings, but here it actually seems like this author does.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Especially with all the even in Kings, like all the prophets rebuking, you'd think that story would be included.
Yeah. Very strange.
Yeah. Anything else there? We didn't talk about verse 15 yet.
Yeah. So you said we're going into verse 15?
Yeah, we're doing verse 15 because we haven't talked about it yet.
And he brought into the house of Yahweh the holy things of his father and his own holy things, silver and gold and utensils.
So we talked last week about Shishak.
Shishak, yeah.
Shishak, and he looted the place, right?
Yeah.
Did it mention anything about them hiding any of this stuff? Because it says that he brought into the house the things of his father, but his father would have been the one who, or maybe not his father, but his grandfather, right? Would have been the one who got looted by Shishak.
Yeah.
Would that just imply maybe something happened in between that we don't know about? Or?
Yeah. That's all I can guess. It doesn't mention anything about them hiding stuff.
It just mentions the bronze shields.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless he just created more. He just didn't mention it.
Yeah. But the idea is that he's refurbishing the place, which is good.
Yeah. Either way, that's the main point.
Yeah.
Is that with Rehoboam, things went backwards, and now it's restoring the kingdom, essentially.
If only it was
it's almost right now he's almost like a Samuel figure. I guess. He's leading mass revival and reform.
Yeah. Is this just gonna be a lot of back and forth? Is following Yahweh, not following Yahweh, or is it just gonna be kind of a little bit of a high here and it's just gonna go downhill again?
More of that one.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so whenever we look at the northern kingdom of Israel, all the kings are just horrible. Right? Just literally every single one of them is just terrible. In the southern kingdom, there's going to be some good ones, but most are bad. And the good ones are going to be really good, mostly. But it's basically, it's going to be kind of like the book of Judges, where it just kind of gets worse and worse. But there are a few high moments in there to give you a little bit of hope. But
yeah, well, it's almost like if you could say those kings were like the judges. It's you go through a long period of just apostasy, and then finally it's the people cry out.
Yeah.
And so those kings would be kind of like the metaphorical judge in that sense.
Yeah.
But, all right. Anything else? All right. Now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. So what's different about that sentence or that verse?
Well, it mentions Baasha
which we haven't heard.
We haven't even met him yet. I remember like when you were reading through it earlier, I was confused. I was like, Baasha's not even on the throne yet.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, I think it's just because of the chronology.
Yeah.
Like he wants to finish one person's story before he goes back over.
Yeah. Well, because technically the last person we've heard about so far is Jeroboam, and Baasha doesn't even come after Jeroboam.
No.
Baasha comes after Nadab, right?
Baasha isn't-
Yeah, but Nadab, like we're gonna get there later on, but Nadab's reign is very short, right?
It's like 2 or 3 years. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe,
And so
maybe 4 or 5.
yeah, so for the majority of Asa's reign, Baasha's gonna be the king, and so it makes sense. But I just think that's like so funny. Like
Yeah, that was
you're kind of like, wait, who's that?
that was the main thing I was thinking of when like I was gonna read through the whole thing, because like we'll get to him, but
Yeah.
I guess I don't think I even read far enough.
Yeah,
That's a matter.
I just think that's really funny because like you're like, wait, who that? Who Baasha? And it's like he's teasing you. I bet you're wondering who Baasha is. We'll get there.
But wait, there's more.
Yeah,
Yeah, I want to stop there first so we address that.
yeah,
We have not heard of this guy yet. He's gonna get introduced in a little bit.
yeah. And once again, ongoing strife between Judah and Israel. It's like
So that's what's the 4th time, if you include
fourth
last
time, yeah.
4th time, including the end of 4th
Yeah.
time. This is almost like the new there was no king in Israel.
Yeah.
Now there was war between king and king.
Now there were two kings. They were constantly fighting.
Yeah. It's like, dang, you wanted a king so bad. Here's two.
Yeah.
All right. So now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. And Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built up Ramah in order to prevent anyone from going out or coming into Asa, king of Judah. What's going on there? What does it mean by what's being like? What does he mean by that?
Verse 18, right?
17.
What's that?
Just trying to like picture what's going on. What is Baasha doing? Because this is in the context of the war specifically. Like it's drawing attention to that.
So I'm assuming Ramah, because I know Ramah's north of Jerusalem. I'm assuming Ramah is like a border town on the edge of. Is that correct? Like between the northern and southern kingdoms?
I don't actually remember the specific location, but that would make sense considering what it seems to be. Like.
Yeah, I'm going to look at the map. I know that it's right north of it. I'm trying to see if I have a map of Judah and... Ramah's a small enough town that it doesn't mention it. So Ramah was the town that Samuel was from. Yeah, I'm assuming that it was just...
For some reason I was thinking it was like on the eastern border, but that wouldn't make sense because it'd be a Judah town.
Yeah. The main reason I remember it being north is because if you remember the story in Judges, whenever the Levite and his concubine are traveling north, they come to Jebus, which is Jerusalem, and they're wanting to stay there, and he says, no, let's just keep traveling north to either Gibeah or Ramah. And they end up staying in Gibeah, but Gibeah and Ramah are right next to each other. So I'm assuming that's the issue, because if Jerusalem is south and like Ramah's right there...
It's directly in between Gibeah and Mizpah.
Okay.
So it's Jerusalem, Gibeah, Ramah, Mizpah, Bethel.
Okay.
And they're all like...
Yeah. So what it seems like he's doing is that he's coming down, he's fortifying Ramah, because that would be like, I guess, the southernmost border of Israel, the northern kingdom. And he's building up the city like with walls and stuff like that to prevent his own people. Is that what it is? It's like he's preventing his own people from going down to Judah?
I guess that probably could be it. I think the thing I was reading had mentioned something more about like cutting off like maybe like almost like a blockade.
Okay.
But I guess really that's not really like a border with like other nations. That's more of a border between Israel and Judah.
Yeah.
So that might be more like I don't know, maybe like a blockade or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm trying to... Because it says, in order to prevent anyone from going out or coming into Asa, king of Judah. Like, I'm trying to figure out who he's trying to prevent. I'm assuming it's from his own people. Like, he's trying to keep his own people from going down, like, there. But I don't know.
I mean, we've seen the phrase, like, going out and coming in, but... I don't know, maybe it could... I guess it could also... Are you saying, like, preventing, like, the Judeans from returning?
Well, yeah, like the people of Israel. Like he's almost doing what it seems like Jeroboam was afraid of.
Of them, like, fleeing?
Like, yeah, Jeroboam was afraid of the people returning back to Judah. It seems like that's almost what Asa is trying to do here as well. It's like his attempt to, because usually the phrase going out and coming in speaks of like close relationships, right? Like, so like David was good at going out and coming in amongst the people.
Yeah.
And Absalom was good at going out and coming in. It seems like it's more like he's like afraid of them becoming buddy-buddy with Asa.
Oh, okay.
Right? That's how I'm reading it. I could be wrong there.
I guess I guess the way I was thinking about it was like if Asa's like if his like commanders and soldiers were going out and coming in, it's almost like cutting them off from returning back.
And that makes more sense because it's in the context of war. Like so.
I don't know. It can be both.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah.
Because he definitely wouldn't want his own men deserting either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the main thing I just wanted to point out was that like I just wanted to like paint the scene, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
So Asa and Baasha, they're fighting right now, and Baasha has built up Ramah, which is basically right at the border between Israel and Judah, and he's preventing people from crossing the border. So that's what we read, and then Asa took all the silver and the gold which were left in the treasuries of the house of Yahweh, and the treasuries of the king's house, and delivered them into the hand of his servants. And King Asa sent them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimon, the son of Hazael, king of Aram, who lived in Damascus, saying, "Let there be a covenant between you and me, as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you a gift of silver and gold. Go, break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me." So what's going on here? What's Asa's strategy?
Bribery?
Well, it sounds like the enemy of my enemy is my friend,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, Aram is Syria, right? So it's directly north of Israel, and so basically you've got Aram, Israel, Judah, right? So Israel is sandwiched in between Judah and Aram, and so it seems like, I guess Syria and Israel had a agreement, and Judah's trying to butter up the king of Aram and be like, "Yo, dude, help me out instead, because we could defeat this guy if we work together." Is that kind of what's going on?
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it also seems like he's entirely undoing what he just did. Like, it says, he took all the silver and the gold, which were the treasures of the house. And like just a few verses earlier, he's the one who put them there.
So if I recall correctly, because obviously Chronicles gives more details, one of the big things with Asa is that he was faithful and there was peace in the land. And it says because it talks about two different battles where he fought like one other people and then the Ethiopians. And he said that God won the battles for him. So he relied on Yahweh alone to save him. And during that entire first 35 years of his reign, there was peace in the land. And it said until the 35th year of his reign. So this is probably about 35 years in.
Okay.
This happens, and this is right before he gets rebuked by the prophet.
Okay.
Because the reason, like the big shift in this whole thing, is that it literally just went through before about how Asa was relying on Yahweh alone, and that's like everything before this with Israel. It's relying on God to win the battle. God is the one in charge, and he seems to have done that before. But this is where the big shift happens. This is a big no-no.
Yeah, he's making a foreign alliance.
Yeah.
Which the prophets are not fans of. Yeah, we don't trust in swords and chariots. We trust in Yahweh.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm trying to remember what else. I'm pretty sure I had another point I was getting at there, but yeah. So this is probably about 35 years into his 41-year reign.
Yeah, but that even like adds an emphasis on like what's like. It's almost like it shows you the genius of the author here, because he's communicating the same message with fewer details.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have to tell us exactly like what year all that happened. All he has to say is he took those utensils and put them in the house of Yahweh. But then eventually he took those out and gave them to a king. And it's almost like you literally see his devotion being handed away. Right? Like here, his reign started with him like making all these reforms and restocking the temple. And then now he's taking something from God and giving it to another person. Right? So it's like he's actively seeking help from somewhere else.
Yeah, and I I mean, I guess it does say that he was wholly devoted to Yahweh all his days, but it is almost like taking the stuff from the temple and putting it like in another temple.
Yeah.
He's going to someone else to like save him.
Yeah. Well, and once again, from the perspective of the author of Kings, when it says wholly devoted to Yahweh, it's specifically talking about worshiping God instead of idols.
Mm.
And so in this instance, what he's doing is bad, but he isn't turning to worship an idol, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right? So it's
that's
like
true.
like he's doing something wrong, but David did plenty of things wrong as well. Right? And so I think maybe that's kind of what's being communicated there. It's like, yes, this is bad, but he's still devoted to Yahweh. Right?
Yeah.
He's just not being faithful to Yahweh in this instance. If that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. And I don't know if this is like maybe one of the main things, but like with Asa in Chronicles, we get like 3 whole chapters, but in this, we have 5 verses between him being super devoted to this happening, and it might be worth considering that, like, at least it seems like from the perspective of the author that despite the 35 years of being strong and faithful, like, it's not that it's pointless, but in the end, he still didn't finish strong.
Yeah.
And I think that might be something to consider.
Solomon?
Yeah.
Like a lot of people in the Bible. it's an unfortunate trait.
Like in this, like for this story, he's choosing not to like go into super big detail with those 35 years because the highlight is more on how he finished, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But so anything else? Does it all make sense? What's going on here?
So he's just reaching out to the king, Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion, king of Aram. That's just such a long name. And he's asking for a covenant, right? And the main thing is he's like, hey, so I guess apparently, so it says, wait, let there be a covenant between you and me as between my father and your father. So apparently this was an agreement that Abijam had with them? Or is it referring to Rehoboam? Or David?
I didn't look at that
Solomon?
one.
I don't know.
I would think I would think if it wasn't his literal dad, it'd be probably Solomon.
Yeah.
Just because Solomon was the one who
Had
he
peace.
gave. He also gave stuff to the kings of Aram.
That's true. Yeah.
He literally had a covenant with them.
Yeah.
He gave them chariots, and I'm also thinking, were any of these names mentioned when we talked about the adversaries against Solomon? Because wasn't there? Was there 3 adversaries?
There were 3 adversaries.
Wasn't one of them? It was. I don't know if it was the king of Aram, but it was someone who stayed in Damascus. Ben-Hadad sounds familiar.
There was Hadad the Edomite.
Oh, it was just Hadad. Okay.
Yeah.
So the son of Hadad.
And King Asa sent to them Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion. Yeah. Well, he sent to them Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon. Ben-Hadad means son of Hadad.
Hadad, yeah.
So is Tabrimon another name for Hadad? That's interesting.
Could be.
Yeah. So Hadad was an Edomite, though. So he was from Edom. And then the other one was Rezin of Eliada. And he's the one who went to... Damascus. Yeah.
Oh, he's the one who went to Damascus. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The other guy is the one who went to Egypt, right? The Shishak?
Yeah. Yeah, so it says, God also raised another adversary to him, Rezin, son of Eliada, who had fled from his lord Hadadezer, king of Zobah. He gathered men to himself and became leader of a marauding band after David slew them at Zobah. And they went to Damascus and stayed there and reigned in Damascus. So he was an adversary to Israel all the days of Solomon, along with the evil that Hadad did. And he abhorred Israel and reigned over Aram. So Rezin, son of Eliada, was king over Damascus. And now we got Ben-Hadad, son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion, king of Aram. I have no idea. I don't know. Worth a Google.
Yeah. Someone way smarter than us did
Yeah.
that work.
Yeah, not super important for understanding the main point of the passage, but definitely worth a Google if we're really just trying to be exhaustive in our understanding of the history here.
I was just curious if they were people mentioned previously.
Yeah.
Okay. So he goes to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabrimon, son of Hezion, king of Aram, saying, "Let there be a covenant between you and me, as between my father and your father. Behold, I have sent you a gift of silver and gold. Go break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, so that he will withdraw from me." So Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his military force against the cities of Israel and struck down Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth Maacah, and all Kinneroth, besides all the land of Naphtali. So, what happened there? How does the king of Aram respond to Asa?
He gets ready for war, goes and attacks the city.
Yeah, so he listens to him.
So he listens to him. Baasha hears it, stops what he's doing, and then
Yeah, so like, where's like Dan and Naphtali? That's up north. So just trying to paint the picture. So you have, like I said, Israel, Judah, and then Aram's up here. So it's almost like a two front war, if you will. So he breaks his covenant with Israel and he attacks north. Because if you remember, Dan and Naphtali, that's like the land. Like Naphtali, I believe, is on the seashore, the coast, and Dan's up in the north as well. So I'm just essentially just the Arameans, they attack from the north, and so
makes sense. Yeah.
just trying to paint the picture a little bit.
Mhm.
Now it happened that when Baasha heard of it, he ceased building up Ramah and remained in Tirzah. Then King Asa caused an announcement to be heard throughout all Judah. None was exempt. And they carried away the stones of Ramah and its timber with which Baasha had been building. And King Asa built with them Geba of Benjamin and Mizpah. So what happens there? So we have the Arameans attacking from the north, and they capture a few cities.
So Baasha hears of it, cuts out. He's like, okay, we can't be doing this. We got more problems. We got problems up north. We need to go take care of that. And then Asa basically says, he's like, okay, I want all my people to, like, he basically enslaves them and says, go grab those materials that Baasha was using, and we're going to use them for our own benefit.
Right. Yeah. It seems like, at the very least, the Arameans, what's the word? Like almost like a diversion. They caused Baasha to withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
To I don't know if that'd be more of like, if it was more of like a scare into getting him to retreat, or if it was more of just to draw the forces away to attack them.
Well, I think it's also just like they just took a mighty blow. I mean, if you think about how much land this dude just conquered, it says he struck down Ijon, Dan, Abel Beth Maacah, and all Kinnereth, right? Like, so Dan is the northernmost city. Kinneroth, that is Galilee. Like Kinnereth is like the city of, like the whole region of Galilee, right? So he conquers all of that and the land of Naphtali. Like, that is a huge portion of Israel. So, like, I understand why Baasha has to turn his attention there, because it's like, we just lost like a third of our territory.
Oh, it's that much.
Well, it's huge. I mean, that'd be like if I'm mapping it out right in my head, because like Galilee's a pretty big area, and Naphtali is I mean, that's not small either. And it might not be that he conquered literally every single aspect of it, but the idea is that he took a pretty good dent out of them. You know, they put all these maps in the back of Bibles, but they never have the useful ones that I need.
Yeah. So Naphtali, this like Kinnereth is like towards the like southernmost part of Naphtali. So
Kinnereth is a city, but it's also a region.
Oh, okay, I see.
And so like that's why like that when it says all Kinnereth, I'm assuming it's not talking just about the city. I'm assuming it's talking about the entire like vicinity there.
Okay.
So like the Sea of Galilee is known as Lake Kinnereth, right?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense because it's right on the lake.
Yeah.
So I mean, my phone's not very big, but that right there is the land of Naphtali, and that's the Arameans right there.
Oh,
so they swept in through here, and they would have taken all that land.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
it's a pretty big portion because that's Israel. So it's.
Yeah. They took a pretty good size there. Like it's like also I don't think I'd want to be friends with Ben-Hadad. Because, I mean, like, this dude, you make a covenant with him, and then somebody else, like, gives him a little bit of money, and he's like, all right, forget that covenant, I'm joining this guy.
Well, yes, it's just like whoever pays you more money.
Yeah, and I guess that's how politicians are, usually, but,
Yeah, that's worldly. Well, it's worldly
Maybe
kings.
just don't be friends with politicians.
Well, yeah, it's worldly kings, right?
Yeah, they take.
So it said that he went into Dan and Naphtali.
Yeah. Yeah, so Dan is a city up in the north.
Yeah.
That's probably in Naphtali, I imagine.
Yeah.
Right? And then he's working his way down, and he captures all Kinneroth. So, like, he just works his way down, besides all the land of Naphtali. So he's just like, the entire region of Galilee, basically, is his. And it happened that when Baasha heard of it, he ceased building up Ramah and remained in Tirzah. Because it's like he was focusing south, he was focusing on Judah, and then they surprised him up north, and he's like, oh, I've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Asa was wanting. So it's a good tactic, but
Was he trusting in Yahweh?
yeah. But also you have to realize that this is backhanded, because while Israel and Judah are at war with one another, he's also through what Asa is doing here, he's giving up parts of the Holy Land, like of the Promised Land.
Well, that's true.
You know what I mean? Like,
because now the Arameans have it.
yes, and so it's like, good job, you beat Israel, but at what cost? Like, y'all are supposed to be unified. Like, good job. Like, I don't know. It's like you shot yourself in the foot. Like, good job, you figured out how to pull the trigger of the gun, but now you're injuring yourself, really. Yeah. And so he goes to Tirzah, which we mentioned Tirzah in the last chapter, I'm pretty sure.
I think so.
It seems like Tirzah is kind of functioning as like the de facto capital at this point. Eventually it'll become Samaria, but yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. That's why we just need to all the map of Israel is just so helpful. In order to picture all this stuff, especially whenever you get to all this political scheming and stuff like that, and you hear about battles. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Studies a map.
So Baasha, it's so funny to me that we're also reading all about Baasha and we haven't even introduced him yet. We're not, yeah. So Baasha hears of it. He ceases building Ramah. He goes back to Tirzah. And then King Asa caused an announcement to be heard. Nobody's exempt. And they go carry away the stones at Ramah. So he basically undoes everything that Baasha had been doing. Right? He basically just all the fortifications, he takes it away. And he brought them to Geba to build those places up instead. It's like, dang. Baasha was upset when he came back.
Yeah. Anything else?
Is Geba of Benjamin the same as Gibeah? I feel like I heard that somewhere.
I don't.
But they might be two different cities.
I think we talked about that. I thought I remember Geba being different, but we may have talked about how they may have been the same.
Okay. On a map, it says that they're just right next to each other, but I think that's probably just people being confused on whether or not they're the same.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like Gibeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? Okay. Now the rest of all the acts of Asa, and all his might, and all that he did in the cities which he built, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? But in the time of his old age he was diseased in his feet, and Asa slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David his father. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his place.
It's interesting that he was diseased in his feet. And I'm not totally sure if it was that disease that killed him or if it was something else.
Yeah, I think people even debate about what it was or what the reasoning for it was.
Yeah.
Obviously, Chronicles gives more details. I don't remember if it elaborates on this specifically.
I don't think it tells us.
I know I forget what it was that some people, if they think it's not gangrene, but
Yeah.
something like that. But some people thought the time frame wasn't proper for that.
Yeah, it says, in the 39th year of his reign, Asa became diseased in his feet. His disease was severe, yet even in his disease he did not seek Yahweh, but the physicians. Right?
So again, it's emphasizing the trusting in.
Yeah, it's emphasizing that he's starting to put his trust in foreign, like other things, right? He's not seeking Yahweh, he's seeking Ben-Hadad. He's not seeking Yahweh, he's seeking physicians. So Asa slept with his father, having died in the 41st year of his reign. So he apparently got his feet got sick 2 years before he died.
Yeah.
Two things that stick out to me here. It says, now the rest of all the acts of Asa and all his might and all that he did in the cities which he built. Like, that's a phrase that isn't usually there. Like it says, and all his might, and it emphasizes the cities which he built. I don't know. The phrase, and all his might, I think is interesting. Like, I guess it implies that Asa had a reputation for being mighty. You know? And then the second thing I wanted to highlight is I would hate to have the name Jehoshaphat. There's way too many fat jokes that could come with that.
True.
Joe's so fat. You know, like it's like
so fat.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's got to be a few lame jokes in a Bible study.
Hey, that was good. That was good.
It was great.
The people listening on YouTube are gonna be like, "Wow, we have the most encouraging Bible study ever."
And I guess there's two lame jokes because also the guy was diseased in his feet.
Oh, lame.
See, that was a better joke. That was good. That took me a second.
I think Benjamin Franklin had that too.
Yeah.
But anything else before we move on? I mean, like, I guess overall, how would we view, like, how does the author present Asa, like his character and his reign? What do you think we'd say about that?
Overall, he was a good king.
I think explicitly, he's good. Implicitly, he's all right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what the author explicitly says was on like the previous slide, and he says, yeah, he was good. He did great things. But this slide right here and these verses kind of suggest there were some things that were like, about him. But I think in the long run, it seems to suggest overall decent. I think it gives him a better review than Chronicles does.
Yeah, that's true. So the fact that the fact that the author of Kings chooses to not mention all the stories about him, like about him basically going from like slowly trusting less and less in Yahweh, because he doesn't give the stories where he relied on Yahweh, and then he doesn't give the stories of the rebuke, and there's probably a reason for that, because in the end, he, like I said, he didn't finish the strongest, but I mean, really, even in this chapter, I mean, there isn't a huge emphasis on like the rebuke.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. It's like implicit. Like for somebody, like if you've studied the Torah, you can see where he's making mistakes, but the author himself doesn't fully rebuke him for it.
Yeah, like you still come to the same conclusion that he wasn't trusting in Yahweh, but it's definitely not the author's focus.
Yeah, like the author of Chronicles spells it out for you. He's like, here's where Asa went wrong, whereas this guy's like, he was overall a good king, but here's some other details which might make you ponder.
Considering the kings before and after him, he was great.
yeah.
He really,
with all the comparison to everybody else, dude, spectacular. Yeah.
He really was like a lamp, because on both sides was like darkness.
Yeah.
All the kings before Asa just...
That's true. The author of Kings is just saying, hey, beggars can't be choosers. He's like, hey, he's the best king we had.
Take what we can get.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. There's something to say for that. It is kind of like a little spark of hope. Like, that despite all of what Rehoboam and Abijam did, there is still hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like really, it's just the argument of the whole Bible up until Jesus arrives, right? It's like the whole thing is that you've got all these like broken people who just mess up, and it's kind of like, well, that's the best we got. You know what I mean? You got David, man after God's own heart, and like the Bible's like, this dude's the best. But then like he does the whole Bathsheba thing, and you're like, really? This is the best we got? And it's like, yeah, that's what we're working with. Like nobody's good. No, not one. Right? Nobody's righteous. And like that's really the argument of the Bible. It's like God's just gracious and he can use everybody. But none of them are Jesus. It's where whenever Jesus shows up and he's perfect, you're like, thank you. Finally. And then Jesus is like, love like I love. And you're like, oh no. It's like, wait, I'm supposed to be like that guy? I can't live up to that. But yeah, so I think in general, the author of 1 Kings is like, yeah, he's all right. I'm not complaining.
He's not great, but he was chill.
Yeah. He did a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Anything else here before we move on? You got, 8 more verses?
Something like that.
Yeah. Alright. Now Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and walked in the way of his father and in his sin, which he made Israel sin. Then Baasha, the son of Abijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, while Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon. So Baasha put him to death in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, and became king in his place. Now it happened that as soon as he was king, he struck down all the household of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam anyone who drew breath, until he had destroyed them, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke by the hand of his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, and because of the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, and which he made Israel sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days.
Nice.
There it goes, reiterating that Asa and Baasha had war.
Mm-hmm.
So Nadab was only king for 3 years?
Two. And then there was a prophecy fulfilled.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, here, so we're no longer talking about Judah. We're talking about Israel now.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this is where it's going to get kind of confusing, because this is where you have to pay attention to the name. Right? Because usually we're used to Israel referring to the whole land, and we're used to Judah referring to the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
But now Israel refers to northern kingdom, Judah refers to southern kingdom. And so we're now in the northern kingdom again, and it's almost like we're rewinding in time, and we're tracing the other kings there.
Yeah, well, it's like they'll never like skip a king on the other side. So like if he was 41 years, but there's like 333, they'll do all these kings until they get like, what kind of do that?
Yeah, they're not. Then it would just be too chaotic. It's like, okay, we're gonna get to this point, like till there's a little moment of stability, and they're like, we'll get there, and now let's go back and tell you what was happening. Meanwhile, back in Israel, and in this story right here, we see the end of the first dynasty in Israel. Jeroboam's dynasty comes to an end. Womp womp. 2-person dynasty.
Yeah,
Still better than King Saul though.
that's true.
Yeah.
Anything else before we go verse by verse?
Let's do it.
I already said it, but prophecy fulfilled, and we see a familiar name in verse 29.
Abijah.
Now Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years.
So, doing math, we are now 24 years into the divided kingdom. Right? Because Jeroboam,
Almost 22.
he reigned 22 years. And now Nadab, his son, reigns another 2 years.
Mm-hmm. So in Judah we've had Rehoboam, we've had Abijam, and then Asa.
Yeah.
And then after Asa, we went back to Israel, and we had Jeroboam, and now we have Nadab.
Yeah.
And then Baasha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I forget. There was something about what Nadab's name was. I don't remember what it was.
Yeah. The main thing I just think of is whenever you think of Nadab, you think of Nadab and Abihu in the book of Leviticus. And Nadab and Abihu were not good. And we talked about this last week, how Jeroboam's kids' names were Nadab and Abijah. And so it's like, that's not too different. And Nadab and Abijah, they were the 2 sons of Aaron who were killed for offering improper fire before the Lord.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah. And so Yeah, just by Nadab's name, you're like, this guy's probably not going to be a very good king.
That's true.
Yeah.
So Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, became king over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh, and he walked in the way of his father, and in his sin which he made Israel sin. Uh-oh.
Yeah.
No bueno.
Very, very bad.
So you have the 2 years, which is already a bad sign, and then it continues and says he did what was evil in the sight of God, and then it just keeps getting worse and worse.
And worse.
What I find interesting is that, once again, this is something that we take for granted, but the fact that Yahweh still has his eyes on Israel is amazing.
Yes.
Because Yahweh's covenant, like, really, the one that's being emphasized so much is a covenant with David, right? And God's presence dwells in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is not part of Israel anymore, right? Israel is a separate thing. Israel has turned to idolatry. But Yahweh is still watching them, right? Because God has a covenant not only with David, but he has a covenant with all of Israel through the Mosaic covenant, and he also has a covenant to Abraham's seed, right? So I just think that's interesting that, like, even though God is dwelling in a place which is not Israel, right? Because Jerusalem is Judah now.
Yeah.
Yahweh is still watching Israel. I just think that's, like, it just shows the faithfulness of God. I just think that's a cool thing that, like, I don't want us to overlook. Because, like, we take it for granted, but we shouldn't. Because God has every reason to just focus on Judah now.
That's true.
But he doesn't.
It's like, if any time, it would be now.
Yeah.
Definitely. And of course, and also because of that, he does still hold them accountable to like what they're doing. But that is also a good thing because, I mean, in the same way that he has his eyes on them and holds them accountable, that also, I mean, really it also shows that he cares for them because really one of the worst things he could do is just leave them to stay in their sin.
Yeah.
And so the fact that he still sends them prophets and does this stuff, it really does also highlight that he does really care about them still.
Yeah.
I also think it's sad that every time it mentions like the sin of like the king, it also groups Israel with that sin.
Yeah.
I guess for one, because usually the state of the king will also have a big impact on the state of the nation, but also the way it's worded, where it shows a sense of like forcing, like the sin that he made Israel sin.
Yeah. Well, because he's the leader of the people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even sorry, what was it?
No, I was just gonna say, like, even like, I mean, like Jeroboam, he in a sense he really did, because he created this like false religion and tried to keep people from even going to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So like it is almost quite literally making them sin to
Yeah.
begin with. But what were you gonna say?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say it was really two things. Hopefully, I can remember what it was. It was about the phrase "walked in the way of his father." So one aspect of that is just an interesting trend throughout the Bible, is that people don't really walk in the ways of their father unless it's regards to sin. Like there's this general trend of bad discipleship. Like you don't see many faithful sons, I can say, right? Like to where really, like, throughout the Bible, like the hardest thing is keeping people faithful throughout generations.
Yeah.
Right? That's why God needed somebody to protect the way of Yahweh. Right? They needed, like, that's what Abraham was appointed to do, right? He's a guardian of the way because it's so difficult to keep people faithful. Right? But right here, it just says it naturally. He walked in the way of his father. Right? Sin, like, discipling people in sin is not difficult. Discipling people in faithfulness is. Right? It just comes naturally to us to replicate our father's sins. Right? Whenever you read about Isaac in Genesis, it emphasizes how he just does the same thing that his father did. Right? Where he tells his wife, hey, want to act like you're my sister? Right? Like, it's like we pick up our parents' sins, and those come in a lot more naturally to us than picking up their virtues or their faithfulness does. Right? You don't have to try. Like, if your parents have anger issues, you don't have to try to replicate that. You just kind of naturally pick it up. Right? Whereas if your parents are really faithful, well, it's going to, like, you have to put in a concerted effort to choose to make that faith your own as well. You know what I mean? And the other thing I was going to highlight there is just the phrase "walk in the way." The Bible's constantly presenting there's two ways, right? There's the way of faithfulness. There's the way of unfaithfulness, right? There's the way, like there's the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent, and it seems like Nadab here is walking in the wrong way. Just I don't know, the two paths.
Yeah. It's also kind of interesting. I mean, I don't know if it's important at all, but I mean, technically, the last king we talked about, Asa, I think it did say that he walked in the way of his father David. And so it is really like two people who both walked in the way of their father. It's just a question of who the father is.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me think of, it's off topic, but it makes me think of the discourse in John, was it 6? Or John 8 with, I think it's John 8, with Jesus talking to the Jews about like, they say like, we're the seed of Abraham.
Yeah.
And he's like, if Abraham was your father, you'd be doing this, but your father is the devil. So I mean, there's a connection there, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything else there? All right. So he did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh and walked in the way of his father and in his sin which he made Israel sin. Then Baasha, the son of Abijah of the house of Issachar, conspired against him. And Baasha struck him down at Gibbethon, which belonged to the Philistines, while Nadab and all Israel were laying siege to Gibbethon.
So that's a totally different Ahijah, right?
I would have to assume so.
Yeah, because this is like this Ahijah, like the only other Ahijah we've heard about so far was
Last chapter.
well, there's Ahijah the Shilonite, which we're going to talk about in verse 29, and then there's Abijam. No, that's Abijam. Just kidding. So yeah, the only
yes, Abijah.
yes. Yeah. So the only other Ahijah we've heard of is Ahijah the Shilonite, which is a totally different person.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, like that's what I'm saying. All the names like start like blending together here. But this is Ahijah of the house of Issachar. So a totally different tribe. Whereas Jeroboam was from the tribe of, was it Ephraim?
I think so.
I think so. I'll check.
It might have been. No, I don't think it was Manasseh.
Ephraim. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about that.
Yeah. So he kills Nadab.
Yeah, and I guess also context, they're fighting the Philistines.
Yeah.
They popped up back again.
Which is that's a lot further north, or I don't know where Gibbethon is, but the fact that they're fighting Israel suggests the Philistines are further north than usual.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's not one of the cities that we've really heard about of the Philistines occupying.
Gibbethon is... So, to be fair, it is on like the southern region of Israel. So it is kind of near, like it's just north of Ekron, which was a city of the Philistines.
I see. Yeah, it's in Dan.
The tribe of Dan, yeah.
So it's also really close to Judah too.
Yeah. That makes more sense.
Okay.
So if you remember the Philistines, they're like on the coastal region. They're on like the southwest part of Israel, like where Gaza is nowadays. Right? That's where the Philistines were at. Which is why, I mean, even to this day, it's Palestine. Right? So,
yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's basically Judah, Philistia, Israel, and then like the Arameans.
Yeah.
So they're fighting like over here. Alright. So Baasha put him to death in the 3rd year of Asa king of Judah, and became king in his place. Now it happened that as soon as he was king, he struck down all the household of Jeroboam. He did not leave to Jeroboam anyone who drew breath, until he had destroyed them, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke by the hand of his servant Ahijah the Shilonite, and because of the sins of Jeroboam which he sinned, and which he made Israel sin, because of his provocation with which he provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger.
So Nadab's reign was even less than 2 years. Because it says he became king in the 2nd year of Asa, and he reigned for 2 years, but he was put to death in the 3rd year of Asa. So, you see what I mean there?
Yeah, I think it was like that. It like bled over into a year, and so I think in like Hebrew time they just call it 2 years.
Yeah, so it was probably like a year and a half or something like that, just even shorter. Yeah. So Baasha kills Nadab and becomes king in his place. Just basically it's a coup.
Yeah.
Right? Just, this is not, this is one thing that we're going to see that separates the northern kingdom from the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom is always going to be a descendant of David on the throne, right? It's going to be the Davidic dynasty. Whereas I think Israel goes through 9 different dynasties over the course of time, which is wild. Because we're talking about a 200-year time span, right? From 930 BC till 722 BC. 9 different dynasties.
It's like every couple kings or something.
Yeah, talk about political instability, right? That's wild. That basically means, 200 years divided by 9? That's
20 divided by
9.
20 something.
Yeah, every 20 years a new dynasty's in place. Average. It's wild. Yeah. Now it happened as soon as he was king, he struck down all the household of Jeroboam. Why do y'all think he did that?
Mainly because of his evil, his sin.
Well, there's also a much more practical reason too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Why would he strike down all the household of Jeroboam?
That was the only one rising up and revolting and trying to reclaim.
Yep.
But it's also prophesied that no one from his house would be alive.
Yeah. Well, practically speaking, Jeroboam was the king, and his descendants would, if there was any member of the house of Jeroboam alive, they would be the ones next on the throne. Right? And so, if you're going to form a coup, you have to kill everybody else. Right? That was the issue that David and Jonathan faced, remember?
Yeah.
David and Jonathan, they had this foolish aspiration, not foolish, naive, right? They had this naive aspiration that maybe David could be king and Jonathan could be his right-hand man. But as time passed, they began to realize there's no way that David would ever be king if anybody in Saul's household was still alive.
Mm.
And so if you're wanting to kick a king out of office, you got to kill his entire family. So that's what Baasha's doing here.
Yeah. And then obviously not because of what Baasha's not under his conscious decision, but obviously I think what you were saying is that implicitly it is also to fulfill the word of Yahweh, because God's really the one behind all of this. And that's what it says, right? It says, he did not leave to Jeroboam anyone who drew breath until he had destroyed them, according to the word of Yahweh, which he spoke by the hand of the servant Ahijah the Shilonite. So even though Baasha is the one doing it, ultimately God is still behind it, or he's at least allowing it to happen to accomplish his word.
Which is just really cool.
Yeah.
Right? You just think about how God works all that, because this is going to be just a running thing throughout 1st and 2nd Kings. All these people are doing things out of evil motives, but they're actually accomplishing God's will as they're doing it. Mm-hmm. Right? The Babylonians, whenever they destroyed Jerusalem, they're not thinking, oh man, I can't wait to discipline the people of Judah for sinning against God. That's not what they're thinking. They're thinking, we want to conquer this territory. And Nebuchadnezzar could care less about serving God. But whenever you read the prophets, God says, my servant Nebuchadnezzar. And you're like, wait, what? Because God's I'm sending Nebuchadnezzar. But Nebuchadnezzar doesn't know he's being sent.
Yeah.
Right? He's fulfilling prophecy, but he does not know that. And it just kind of communicates that there is this entire unseen realm. Everything that's happening, there's both a human and a supernatural component to it. Right? It's and humans aren't always in touch with the supernatural component. Usually, most often, they're not.
Yeah.
Right? To where Baasha, he could, we're going to say he's evil, right? He doesn't care about fulfilling the word of Yahweh. He's just going to serve his own thing. But he is fulfilling the word of Yahweh. So he stumbles into accidentally doing the will of God. But he's not doing it for, kind of like Samson.
Yeah.
Right? Samson. Classic example of this dude delivers the people of Israel from Philistines, not because he's being faithful to God, but just because he throws temper tantrums. And he's being driven by lust, and so he marries a Philistine woman, but then the people make him mad, and so he kills a bunch of Philistines. And then he goes and sleeps with a prostitute, and some people trap him in a city, and so he kills Philistines. And then he's, just chilling out by a rock, and then people capture him, and he kills Philistines. And then he's trying to sleep with another girl, she cuts his hair off, and he's in a temple, and he kills Philistines. He's not doing it out of, devotion to God, he's simply doing it out of temper tantrums. but he's doing God's will. Like I just think it's cool, like the aspect of like human responsibility, divine sovereignty, working together. Just I don't think Calvinism answers it. That's my 2 cents. We don't have to get into that, but
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
But it's definitely something to be aware of.
I guess we should probably read the part where Ahijah prophesied that.
Yeah,
That was that in last week's chapter?
Yeah.
That was
That was the whole thing about like sweeping the dung.
yeah. Oh yeah, that was the exciting part. Go say, this is what Ahijah said. Remember whenever Jeroboam's wife tried to disguise herself?
Yeah.
Go say to Jeroboam, thus says Yahweh God of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people and made you leader over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you. Yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and who followed me with all his heart to do only which was right in my sight. You also have done more evil than all who were before you, and you have gone and made for yourself other gods and molten images to provoke me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I am bringing calamity on the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam everyone who pisses against the wall, both bond and free in Israel, and I will make a clean sweep of the house of Jeroboam as one sweeps away dung until it is all gone. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs will eat, and he who dies in the field, the birds of the heaven will eat, for Yahweh has spoken it. So that's what Ahijah prophesied. And then, a few years later, Baasha comes in and does it. And just so you know, I heavily doubt that this was I doubt Baasha had ever even heard this prophecy, because if I was Jeroboam's wife, I probably wouldn't go around telling everybody this. So I doubt many people knew about this prophecy being made, which is also cool.
Yeah, it makes it even cooler. And we already talked about it, right? And it also mentioned it in what you just quoted, but it says, and because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he sinned, and which he made Israel sin, because of his provocation, which he provoked Yahweh, the God of Israel, to anger. What probably is he, like, what is it probably referring to here when it talks about, like, the sin and the provocation?
Was it when Jeroboam set up those idols?
That's definitely part of it, yeah. I'd say that, like, I guess the overarching thing is that he essentially created this whole false religion, right? And that included building high places, altars, idols,
Appointing priests.
Yeah, that's right. Even making the entire priesthood, just essentially creating his own law of sorts, I suppose you could say, like a faux Israelite religion. And so, really, all those things. Whether we talked about whether or not he believed it or not was one thing. I doubt he, for 1 second, actually believed it. But nevertheless, he still led people to engaging in it, and he also still engaged in it himself, if nothing else, to make people think that he took it seriously. Mm-hmm. And you're also making a mockery of what God commanded, you know. And so obviously we see that he takes that very seriously. Anything else there? Okay, I guess we'll just...
I guess one thing is that in the same chapter we've had both an emphasis on God's grace and God's wrath.
Wrath, yeah.
Right? So with Judah, we've seen how they've messed up a lot, but because of David's faithfulness, God has also been faithful, and he's been extremely gracious. Right? Whereas by contrast with Israel, God doesn't simply remember his covenants, he also remembers prophecies are also promises. Right? Like the only reason the only thing that prevents prophecies from just being promises is the opportunity for repentance. Right? Usually prophecies are warnings, but if you don't repent, that warning turns into a promise.
Yeah.
And so with Judah, God has been gracious because David was faithful, and so he's honoring his covenant. With Israel, though, Jeroboam didn't repent, right? And and the children of Jeroboam aren't repenting, and God remembers that too, right? And so he isn't just gracious, he's also got wrath, and he's got anger, and it's got both, right? And so whenever people try to characterize God as one or the other, you have to realize that it's both, right? This is who God is, right? He is a jealous husband, but he's a faithful husband, right? And he loves you so much that whenever you cheat, he is going to be hurt by it, and he's going to be mad. But if you repent, he's going to bring you back, right? And so that's the really the beauty of God. That people, I don't know, for some reason people, whenever God gets angry, they get weirded out by it. But I think it's actually a beautiful thing because it shows how much he cares.
Definitely.
Yes.
Well, it's not even really tough love, because the thing is, he's so gracious about it, right? I mean, tough love would be not new, he's so kind. Really, tough love would be, okay, Israel, you've messed up enough, I'm going to wipe you out. But he doesn't do that. And even when he does wipe them out, he brings them back.
Yeah.
Right? And so he's really just, even his anger is, he's holding back. Right? That's the whole thing. He's, he wiped out the house of Jeroboam, but he should have wiped out all of Israel. Right? But instead, he just takes it out on the leader. Right? I just think that's cool.
Very long of nose.
Very long of nose, yes. Slow to anger. Mm-hmm. For those of y'all watching on YouTube who did not recognize that reference.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What was I going to say? Anyway, all right, we'll finish up here. Now the rest of the acts of Nadab and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? Now there was war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. There is more to the chapter, but this is all we're reading through tonight.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's because verse 33 kind of bleeds into chapter 16.
Yeah. Any other thoughts? We keep seeing that phrase popping up.
There was war between
Asa
Central King
Asa
and the
Baasha.
other king.
There was war all their days between Judah and Israel.
I just think it's interesting that it keeps referencing that.
Yeah. The one in the statement in Judges is a lot easier to draw a direct thing from what is the point.
Yeah.
This one, all I can really think of is it was never meant to happen.
Yeah, I think it's just emphasizing how bad things have gotten, right? I mean, we went from, think about it. Just 4 chapters ago, we were in a united monarchy, right? 7 chapters ago, we were dedicating the temple, right? Well, yeah, in 1 Kings chapter 8, you had Solomon giving this amazing prayer, right? And it felt like the culmination of the whole biblical story. And then there's this epic reversal where, not only are the kingdoms divided, but they're at war with one another, right? It's almost like the Cain and Abel story again, right? To where it's not only was there this fall, right? It's like King Solomon, his story was a second fall, right? To where it's he turned from God. And then what we're seeing here is the Cain and Abel story, where brothers turning against brother trying to kill each other. Right? It's almost like things are just getting worse again. And it's we're seeing Genesis play out, and it's just emphasizing warfare, enmity, seed of woman, seed of serpent. And it's it's just constant. I think that's probably what it's emphasizing. It's just war. There was war between these 2 kings. Those 2 kings died, and new kings were in their place, and there was war between those 2 kings. One of those kings died, and the new king still went to war with the other dude. It's just all the different, no matter how you mix it, they're always at war. And these are supposed to be the unified people of God. But instead, it's 10 tribes versus 2, constantly fighting.
Like little children.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like rebellious children.
So, that's the text for tonight. We talked about stuff here and there, but may as well throw it out there. But does anyone have any other application points or takeaways? We talked about some, but
I think that we're going to start getting into, well, at least probably this chapter and next week's chapter. They're probably going to be harder chapters to find direct applications.
Yeah.
I think the applications we're probably going to be drawing out of them are probably going to be more reflective in nature. right? Maybe not like, here's what I need to do, but it's more like
takeaways,
like just about the human heart and like God's faithfulness and compassion. Like it's more like theological applications, right? Like worldview shifting things, which are honestly probably the best applications. But yeah, like because we've highlighted stuff about like who God is and what humans do and stuff like that, but I don't know. Some of y'all might have more direct things to think of. Probably don't have a kid with your mom. That's not
okay.
Yeah.
I don't think any of us struggle with that.
Well, hey,
I mean,
if the house of David can do it, don't count yourself. Like just be aware.
Be faithful to God, and if you sin, repent immediately.
Yeah.
That's what I do.
That's what I want to do.
Amen.
I don't think any of us really does it that well, but we should.
We already talked about it, but just the way that sometimes we view people versus the way that God sees us sometimes, like, not to like underplay how it's not to underplay like being faithful, obviously, but sometimes in some ways God is more gracious than we are towards each other. Just realizing that, first and foremost, the first thing that God asks of us is to be faithful to Him, and obviously we don't live in the culture like they do, where we're surrounded by all these other like literal like other gods like that. But I would still argue that it still applies because we have maybe other kinds of gods that we can turn to, and really in that sense it's almost harder because I think it's easier to turn to the things that we have than it is to turn to like a fish god.
Yeah.
Just just.
Well, no, it is.
I'm just saying, like it's like we don't live in that culture anymore where it's like we have like Dagon or like some Astra pole. Like I mean, we laugh at that now. We're like well, why would you ever fall for that?
Yeah.
Well, no, like there were fish gods, and like Dagon was. People believe he was a fish god at least, but like no, like what you're saying is 100% true because nowadays we just don't live in a culture that like idolatry in that sense is not the culture we live in, but we've replaced it with stuff that is equally as idolatrous. We've just moved away from using religious terminology. But like there's so many things that we worship, like just ask people, like if you looked in in ancient cultures, most people, like the God they worship testified to what they lived for, right? I mean, because like the thing is, like why did they worship Baal? Well, it's because they believed Baal was like the storm god who would give them rain. Well, that tells you that what they were like. The reason they worshiped Baal was not because they felt like he was the one who deserved all the devotion. It was because they wanted something from him, right? Well, we can that's what we do as well, right? Why is it that we value relationships above everything else? It's because there's something that we think that relationship offers us that nothing else can, right? It's because we're using things. Well, that's what really idolatry is, right? It's just the objectification of everything, and we're using it. And so we might not use religious terminology and call things idols, but they are. Which then goes back to what you were saying about like God being gracious and like how I think in many ways God is both more gracious with us, but also He's harsher with us than we are on ourselves and with one another. But I think it's because God is just more consistent. Like for us, we kind of just pick and choose, right? We're like, okay, like I'll be gracious with people if I want to be, and only in certain places, right? I'll be more gracious in places where I personally struggle, but if it's something I don't struggle in, then I'll be harsher with them, right? Whereas God, He has a higher expectation of us than we probably have of ourselves, but He also is more gracious with us than we would be, right? To where we can fail and He will still be faithful, but at the same time, He expects He wants us to be wholly devoted, right? If we're not, He'll still be gracious. Right? But like for us, we're like, oh, as long as I go to church, I'm good. And He's like, no. He's like, no, like if you say one tiny white lie, like that's separation for me. Right? So He is harsher with His demands. But when we say that white lie, He's far quicker to be gracious and forgive it. You know what I mean? Like so I think He's got both of those, but we have to realize that we might not be making horrid images that need to be burned in the Kidron Valley. but we have plenty of other things that need to be burned up. Like just different desires in our hearts and stuff that might not be as physical in nature, but that they could be physical as well. Oh, to be human.
I just thought I'd mention that because I think sometimes it's kind of like the whole Pharisee thing, right? Like we look at them and we're like, y'all are so stupid. Like why would y'all do these things? We look at people who worship like Baal and Asherah and stuff. We're like, why would you worship like totem poles?
Yeah.
But we forget that I don't know. Like I feel like in some ways it's almost like more insidious in the world we live in, because for us it's kind of like the whole when we talked about with James with the trials and stuff. In some ways wealth and comfort is it really is a trial of its own, but it's almost more insidious.
Well, just think if the roles were reversed, right? We look back at ancient cultures and we're like, I can't believe that you would worship a statue like that. Well, the thing is, they thought that statue was giving them rain, right? Imagine they were looking at us and they're like, I can't believe you put so much validation from somebody liking your Instagram post, right? It's that's far more ridiculous, right? To me, if you're just practically thinking about it, if you genuinely believe that this statue is in some way going to give you rain, I can understand why somebody would bow down to that. I think they're foolish for doing it. But over here, a person, their whole day can be ruined because they didn't get the number of likes they wanted on Instagram. I mean, the only thing it takes, that's just a person double tapping a photo. But, that's what the person, we really can't look bad at whenever we look back at these people, you're pointing out, when we look back at them and we're like, oh, you're so foolish, we need to really sober up, right? It's judge not lest ye be judged. We are so much worse. The Israelites complain 3 days after they get through the Red Sea. Well, yeah, have you ever been in the wilderness without water for 3 days? Probably not a pleasant experience. We complain against God whenever the Wi-Fi goes out, right? So it's... We definitely are just as bad, if not worse, and we definitely need to make sure that we're not mocking the bad guys in the Bible, or else we're not going to be doing very well on the Day of Judgment, because God's going to be like, hey, they didn't have 66 books in the Bible. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Anything else before we close out? Does someone want to pray us out? Right. Thanks, Maverick.
Dear Yahweh, I pray to you tonight that you continue to watch over us throughout the week, and that the Bible study that we just went over in your word, that we would use it in a good way, and not just to let it puff ourselves up in knowledge. And I thank you for everyone in this room, everyone who's watching, and I thank you for everything, Lord, even though I don't deserve it. But you, Lord, are gracious, and your love will always endure forever. This prayer is in your name only. Amen.
Amen.
So next week we'll pick up at the end of this chapter, and then it'll flow into next chapter.
Very good.